Don't get too comfortable where you are, because God didn't create you to camp out in comfort. He called you to climb into purpose. You've been wondering why things that used to satisfy you don't fill you anymore. Why the place that once felt safe now feels tight. Why the same routine that once brought you peace now feels like pressure. It's not that you did anything wrong. It's that heaven has begun to stir you. When God starts shaking your comfort zone, it's because He's preparing you for elevation. The nest starts breaking because the eagle is ready to fly. You see, comfort can become a prison when you were made for calling. God will disturb your peace before He releases your potential. Sometimes He'll let the very thing you depended on dry up, so you'll stop sipping from a stream that was never meant to sustain your destiny. Discomfort is the delivery room of destiny. Every great thing that has ever been born in the earth had to first come through pressure. Every calling that carries weight had to survive the labor of pain. You cannot give birth to greatness without experiencing the stretching that precedes it. The womb of purpose will never open in comfort. God doesn't use soft places to shape strong people. When you ask Him to use you, when you tell Him you want to walk in destiny, He doesn't hand you a map. He places you in a moment that forces you to grow. Some of the greatest seasons of your life will not feel like blessings when you're in them. They'll feel like breaking. You'll cry, you'll question, you'll feel lost. But somewhere deep down, your spirit will whisper that something is shifting. It's not falling apart, it's falling into place. Because discomfort is heaven's way of preparing you for delivery. Just like a mother in labor, the contractions come before the cry of new life. The pain intensifies because something inside of you is ready to come forth. You can't stay pregnant with potential forever. Eventually, purpose has to push through. That's why the things that once brought you peace are now agitating your spirit. The job that once satisfied you now feels too small. The relationship that used to make you feel secure now feels restrictive. The circle that used to fit you doesn't fit anymore because your spirit has outgrown your surroundings. That discomfort isn't random, it's divine. It's the sign that God is pushing you into the next dimension. He's saying, I've got something greater, but you can't carry it while you're clinging to what's comfortable. Look at every person God ever used in Scripture. None of them stepped into destiny without first facing discomfort. Abraham had to leave the familiar land of his father. Joseph had to go through betrayal in a prison before he ever saw the palace. Moses had to flee Egypt and wander through the wilderness before he could lead a nation. Even Jesus, before his greatest glory, went through the Garden of Gethsemane, where he sweated drops of blood in agony. Every destiny requires a Gethsemane. Every calling comes with contractions. Discomfort is not a sign that God has left you. It's proof that He's closer than ever. When a teacher is giving a test, they stop talking. Not because they're gone, but because it's time for the student to prove what they've learned. The silence of God doesn't mean absence. It means evaluation. You're in a test that is meant to graduate you to the next level of faith. You've been praying for expansion, and God answered by sending a situation that's stretching you. It hurts, but it's holy. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. So many people abort their destiny because they can't endure the discomfort that births it. They mistake pressure for punishment, but the same pressure that breaks the weak builds the strong. Diamonds are born in darkness under pressure. Gold is refined in fire. The anointing you admire in others was not formed in comfort. It was forged in crushing. Don't despise the discomfort. It's proof that something powerful is being produced inside you. When God begins to shift your life, He'll start rearranging things that don't make sense. People will walk away. Opportunities will dry up. Doors you thought were meant for you will suddenly shut. It's tempting to panic, to think something went wrong. But what if God is closing those doors to make room for the ones that lead to destiny? You're being delivered. You're being positioned. You're being prepared for something you can't yet see. Sometimes, God will let you feel restless because He refuses to let you get stuck. The very discomfort that frustrates you might be the same tool God is using to move you. He'll make the nest uncomfortable so the eaglet learns to fly. The wind that looks like a storm is actually the lift beneath your wings. And if you keep resisting the discomfort, you'll delay your development. What you call trouble, heaven calls transition. The problem with comfort is that it creates complacency. You start living beneath your capacity because it feels safe. But nothing great ever grows in safety. Destiny requires risk. Faith requires movement. You can't step into the unknown and hold on to the familiar at the same time. God is calling you to release what's comfortable so you can receive what's called. And yes, it hurts to let go. It hurts to leave the familiar. But if you stay in what's safe, you'll miss what's sacred. You're standing in a spiritual delivery room. Every contraction you feel, every pressure that seems unbearable, is God preparing to bring something forth through you. You're not breaking down. You're breaking through. The tears you've cried, the nights you couldn't sleep, the moments you wanted to quit, those are labor pains. The promise is coming. The vision is crowning. You can't give up now because you're too close to delivery. Think of a seed buried in the soil. In the darkness, it begins to crack open. That cracking looks like destruction from the outside, but inside it's transformation. The seed can't stay a seed and still become a tree. It has to break before it can bloom. The same is true for you. What feels like breaking is really the beginning of becoming. Discomfort exposes what comfort conceals. When everything is easy, you don't pray as hard, you don't depend on God as deeply, you don't stretch beyond your limits. But when life gets tight, when things get uncertain, that's when you lean in. That's when your faith becomes real. That's when you start seeing God not just as a provider, but as your source. The discomfort drives you back to divine dependency. It teaches you that you can't do this on your own. So don't run from it. Don't despise it. Don't rush it. Embrace it. Because what's coming out of you is greater than what's been holding you. Destiny is not delivered without pain. Purpose is not produced without pressure. And calling is never born without conflict. You may feel stretched, but that stretch is sacred. You may feel pressed, but that pressure is producing power. The God who began a good work in you will finish it, but not in comfort. He'll finish it in faith and fire, in the furnace that refines your character and proves your calling. When the discomfort comes, remind yourself, I'm in labor. I'm being delivered into destiny. The pain has a purpose, and the push has a promise. Don't curse your contractions. Praise through them. Because when it's all over, you'll look back and say, it was good for me that I was afflicted. The discomfort didn't destroy me. It delivered me. It didn't bury me. It birthed me. That's why discomfort is the delivery room of destiny. Because before you can hold the promise, you must first survive the push. And when you do, You'll realize that every tear, every trial, every trembling moment was worth it because you gave birth to the very thing God created you to become. When God closes one door, He's creating a new dimension. It's hard to see it when you're standing in the hallway of confusion, staring at the handle that no longer turns, wondering why what used to open easily now refuses to move. You jiggle it, you knock, you pray for it to open, but heaven has already moved on. What you call a closed door, God calls a completed chapter. He's not denying you, He's directing you. He's not rejecting you, He's releasing you. When one door closes, it's because your destiny requires a different dimension. One you can't step into if you're still clinging to what used to be. Every closed door carries a message from heaven that says, it's time to move. You can't walk into the next season holding onto the keys from the last one. What used to fit you can't follow you where you're going. God knows how easy it is to get attached to places, people, and patterns that feel familiar. He knows that if He didn't close certain doors, you'd never leave. So in His mercy, He shuts them, not to break your heart, but to break your habit of settling. He shuts them so you'll stop circling the same hallway of comfort and start walking toward the staircase of purpose. Closed doors don't mean God has forgotten you. They mean He's too wise to let you stay small. Every divine closing is an invitation to rise higher, but most of us can't see that in the moment. All we see is loss. We see the relationship that ended, the job that slipped away, the opportunity that passed by, the plan that didn't unfold. We cry, we question, we wrestle with God's silence. But later, when the fog clears, we realize that if that door had stayed open, it would have led us somewhere beneath what He had prepared. What you thought was rejection was really redirection. What looked like a setback was actually a setup. Look at Joseph. One moment he was favored in his father's house, wearing the coat of many colors. The next, he was thrown into a pit by his own brothers. That was a closed door. Then he was sold into slavery. Another door. Then falsely accused and thrown into prison. Another door slammed in his face. But through every closing, God was positioning him for the palace. If one door hadn't shut, the next one couldn't open. Joseph didn't see it while he was in the pit. But when he stood before Pharaoh as second in command, he looked back and said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." Every door that closed was a step higher in disguise. When you walk with God, closed doors are not obstacles, they're orchestration. They're the rhythm of heaven moving you from one dimension to another. Sometimes, He'll close a door that you prayed for because He knows it's beneath your purpose. He'll withhold what you want so He can release what you're worth. If He had given you what you asked for, it would have limited what He destined for you. So He says no, not to hurt you, but to protect the next level He's calling you into. The problem is, we get so attached to doors that we mistake them for destinations. We think the job is the promise, the relationship is the reward, the opportunity is the end game. But God says, no, that was just a doorway. You were never meant to live there. You were meant to pass through. When He closes one, it's because the hallway is longer than you think. There's another level, another space, another calling waiting on the other side of your obedience. It's uncomfortable to wait between doors. The in-between season feels like a wilderness, silent, stretching, uncertain. But that's where faith grows. That's where you learn to trust His hand when you can't trace His plan. When the door closes, don't panic. Pause. Pray. Praise. Because what looks like an ending to you is actually an opening to something greater in the invisible realm. You're not being left behind. You're being lifted up. When God closes a door, He's not just protecting you from the wrong thing. He's preparing you for the right thing. You might be crying over what walked away, but if it could walk away, it wasn't meant to stay. Stop chasing closed doors. Stop trying to reopen what God has sealed. If you have to force it, it's not favor. If you have to beg it, it's not your blessing. Real doors swing on the hinges of divine timing. When the right one opens, you won't have to strive. You'll just step through. Every new dimension demands a new version of you. That's why some doors close so suddenly. The person you were on this level can't function on the next. God will shut the door to give you space to shed your old skin. He'll isolate you to elevate you. He'll put you in rooms of silence so you can hear Him clearly again. The closing is not a curse. It's a classroom. It's where God teaches you how to release what you can see so you can reach for what you can't. Think of Peter. He fished all night and caught nothing. The door to his effort was closed. But when Jesus showed up, He said, "Launch out into the deep." In other words, step into another dimension. The same sea, but a different side. The same boat, but a different word. And when Peter obeyed, he caught more than he could carry. That's what happens when you stop banging on closed doors and start following divine direction. What once was empty becomes overflowing. Some of you are mourning doors that God Himself shut. You're standing at the threshold, praying for resurrection when heaven has already moved on to new construction. God is saying, don't cry over what I closed. Celebrate what I'm creating. Because while you were weeping over what ended, He was working on what's next. You can't see it yet because you're still in the hallway, but a new dimension is already under construction. When one door closes, something inside of you has to close too. The fear, the doubt, the need for control, the attachment to the old way. All of it has to die so you can be born into the new. God can't pour new wine into old wineskins. He can't reveal new levels to an old mindset. So He allows doors to close, not to confuse you, but to cleanse you. The closing forces you to confront what you've been holding on to. It teaches you surrender. And surrender is the currency of elevation. If you trust Him, every no will eventually make sense. Every rejection will reveal its reason. Every door that's shut will show you. It was saving you from something smaller than your destiny. You'll look back one day and realize that every hallway of confusion was really a bridge to a higher floor. The closed door wasn't the end. It was the beginning of expansion. So if the door won't open, don't lose your faith. Thank God for the closure, because closure creates clarity. Clarity leads to calling, and calling ushers you into a new dimension of destiny. God is not trying to keep you out. He's trying to lift you up. He's shifting you from doorways to dimensions, from access to acceleration, from limited to limitless. And when the next door opens, you'll walk through it not with desperation, but with discernment. You'll know that it wasn't your strength that got you there. It was His strategy. You'll see that every closed door was part of the choreography of your calling. Because when God closes one door, He's not ending your story, He's elevating your stage. He's creating a new dimension where your destiny can finally unfold. You can't fulfill a calling while clinging to comfort. Every destiny demands detachment. Every purpose requires release. There comes a moment in your walk with God when He begins to challenge the very things that make you feel safe. not because he wants to strip you, but because he wants to strengthen you. The very comfort that once protected you can become the chain that prevents you from stepping into what's next. God will not allow you to stay small just because it feels secure. When he calls you higher, he calls you out. And if you're not willing to let go of comfort, you'll never lay hold of calling. The tragedy of many believers is that they want divine elevation without earthly disruption. They pray for new levels, but resist the letting go that comes with it. You can't carry both security and surrender in the same hands. The call of God always requires you to put something down so you can pick something greater up. Abraham had to leave his father's house. Peter had to drop his nets. Elisha had to burn his plow. Every person God ever used had to release what was comfortable before they could walk into what was called. Comfort feels good because it's predictable. You know how it works. You know how to survive there. But calling doesn't operate in predictability. It thrives in obedience. When you cling to comfort, you cling to control. You want to know how it'll work out, where it'll lead, how you'll survive if you let go. But faith doesn't give you that guarantee. Faith says, step out, even when you can't see the floor beneath your feet. And that's why so many people never fulfill their calling. They settle for safety over surrender. They'd rather stay in the boat than walk on the water. When God calls you, he doesn't call you to convenience. He calls you to courage. Comfort asks for your ease, but calling asks for your effort. Comfort says, stay where it's familiar. Calling says, follow me. Comfort keeps you where you are. Calling takes you where you've never been. You cannot obey God fully and still live comfortably. Because the moment you say yes to him, he starts rearranging your environment, stretching your faith, and pulling you into places that require trust over logic. Moses tried to argue with God from a place of comfort. When God called him at the burning bush, Moses said, I can't speak well. He wanted to stay hidden behind his insecurity, his stutter, his past. But God said, go anyway. God never asked Moses to be comfortable. He asked him to be committed. That's what calling does. It interrupts your excuses. It shakes your confidence in yourself, so you'll put your confidence in God. There's something dangerous about getting too comfortable in a temporary place. Israel got comfortable in Egypt. What started as survival turned into slavery. They stayed too long in a place that was never meant to be permanent. And when God raised up Moses to lead them out, many wanted to go back because the wilderness was unfamiliar. They said, we were better off in Egypt. That's what happens when comfort becomes a cage. You start longing for bondage because freedom feels too uncertain. God will never reveal your full calling while you're still clinging to comfort, because comfort clouds your vision. You can't see the promised land while staring back at Egypt. The voice of calling says, let go. The voice of comfort says, hold on. But destiny only opens for those willing to move forward, even when the path is painful. The wilderness wasn't punishment, it was preparation. It stripped them of dependence on Egypt so they could depend on God. You might be in that same place right now. God is calling you to start something new, step into a new season, break away from something familiar. But fear is whispering, what if it doesn't work? The truth is, calling always carries uncertainty. You'll never have all the answers. You'll never feel fully ready. But if you wait until you're comfortable, you'll wait forever. God doesn't need your readiness. He needs your willingness. There is no growth without discomfort. The moment you decide to follow God's call, you step into a process that stretches you. He'll put you in rooms where you feel unqualified. He'll give you assignments that exceed your ability. He'll connect you with people who challenge you. That's not punishment. That's preparation. God knows that calling can only mature through stretching. Just as a muscle grows through resistance, your faith grows through obedience that challenges your comfort. Sometimes comfort isn't just a place. It's a mindset. It's the belief that what you have now is all there will ever be. It's the fear of failing, the need to control outcomes, the desire to avoid risk. But God's call requires faith that sees beyond what is to what could be. When you cling to comfort, you settle for what's known at the cost of what's possible. You can't fulfill a divine dream while protecting a human comfort zone. Look at Peter again. He saw Jesus walking on water and said, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come." Jesus didn't give him a lecture. He gave him a word, "Come." That one word carried both invitation and instruction. Peter had to decide, stay safe in the boat or step out into the unknown. The water didn't become solid until he moved. That's the nature of calling. The miracle doesn't manifest until you move out of your comfort. You can't stay seated when God says, "Step." You can't cling to what's familiar and expect to experience the supernatural. The boat may feel secure, but nothing extraordinary ever happens there. The waves might look wild, but that's where glory is revealed. Every time you choose calling over comfort, you step into a dimension where God's power meets your obedience. There's a reason so many people feel restless in their comfort zones. The spirit inside them knows they were made for more. They've built a life that's safe but not satisfying. Deep down, they feel a pull, a divine discontent that says, "There's something greater." That's not frustration, it's calling. It's God stirring your spirit so you won't die where you've settled. Letting go of comfort doesn't mean abandoning wisdom. It means obeying even when you don't understand the full picture. It means trusting that if God called you, He'll sustain you. You won't always have a safety net, but you'll always have His presence. And His presence is better than any comfort this world can give. Every time you let go of comfort, you make room for calling. Every time you release the familiar, you open the door for the miraculous. The greatest danger to destiny isn't failure, it's familiarity. Because you can recover from failure, but you can't rise while you're rooted in comfort. So ask yourself, what am I clinging to that's keeping me from my calling? What fear, what habit, what comfort is stopping me from stepping forward? You can't live called and comfortable at the same time. The anointing that rests on your life is too heavy for small spaces. God is calling you higher. And the higher you go, the less you can carry. Let go of the comfort, release the need to control. Step out into obedience. Because every time you trade comfort for calling, you trade safety for significance. You trade predictability for purpose. And when you finally walk in your calling, you'll realize that the comfort you left behind was nothing compared to the peace that comes from knowing you're right where God called you to be. The stretch is proof that something greater is coming. Nobody gets elevated without being expanded first. Every promise from God carries pressure, and every blessing comes with a stretch. When you ask God to take you higher, you're also asking Him to stretch your faith, stretch your patience, stretch your obedience, and stretch your capacity. Stretching never feels pleasant, but it is always purposeful. The discomfort you feel is not the end. It's the evidence that God is preparing to release more into your life. You can't receive more while staying the same size. Before God increases your blessings, He increases your capacity to handle them. Think of a rubber band. It's useless until it's stretched. Only when it's pulled beyond its resting place can it fulfill its purpose. You are the same way. If God left you in comfort, your potential would stay dormant. But when He begins to pull on you, through challenges, delays, disappointments, and moments that test your faith, He's not breaking you. He's building your strength. The stretch is His way of preparing you to carry what's coming. Because what's next is greater than what's been, but it also weighs more. God won't give you something that will crush you. So He strengthens you before He blesses you. You can tell when God is about to do something new because life starts to stretch you. Things that used to be easy suddenly take effort. Prayers that used to bring instant answers start feeling like silence. The circle that used to fit you feels tight. You start to sense that you can't stay where you are, but you can't quite see where you're going. That tension, that in-between pull, is the stretch. It's the space between your current level and your coming glory. It's where God proves that you can endure before He enlarges your territory. When a mother is about to give birth, her body stretches to make room for new life. The stretching hurts, but it's holy. The pain is a sign of expansion, not destruction. The same principle applies to your spiritual life. God stretches you to make room for what He's about to deliver through you. You may feel like everything is being pulled apart, but He's really just creating space for something greater. If you don't stretch, you can't grow. And if you can't grow, you'll never reach the fullness of your calling. The stretch often comes disguised as struggle. It doesn't announce itself as a blessing. It shows up as a battle, a challenge that makes you question your strength, a situation that pushes you beyond your comfort zone. But that's how God works. He doesn't grow you through ease, He grows you through endurance. Every time you survive what you thought would break you, you're stretching. Every time you keep believing when it would be easier to quit, you're stretching. Every time you forgive when you want to fight, you're stretching. The stretching season is where God multiplies your strength through resistance. We often pray for expansion without realizing expansion hurts. You can't enlarge something without applying pressure. You can't pour more into a vessel that hasn't been prepared to hold it. So, God allows pressure to test your patience, delays to deepen your dependency, and trials to teach your trust. Each test is a tug on your spirit. Each obstacle is an invitation to stretch your faith beyond what you've seen before. It's uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar, but that's where the miracle is, outside the boundaries of what you know. David felt the stretch when he was anointed to be king, but had to go back to tending sheep. The promise was real, but the process stretched him. God had to prepare his character to match his crown. Joseph felt the stretch when he dreamed of leadership, but found himself in a prison. The dream wasn't denied, it was developing. The stretch between vision and fulfillment is where God shapes your strength. Even Jesus felt the stretch in Gethsemane when he prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." The cross was the ultimate stretch, and resurrection was the ultimate proof that glory always follows pain. The stretch means you're in transition. It's the place between prophecy and performance. It's where you feel pulled in two directions. Your faith saying go, but your fear saying stay. Yet, every time you choose faith, You expand. Every yes in obedience adds a new layer of strength. Every time you refuse to let go of your hope, your capacity increases. You may not see the growth while it's happening, but when the promise arrives, you'll realize that the stretching was necessary to sustain it. When God begins to stretch you, it's a sign of trust. He's saying, I know you can handle more. You might feel like you're being stretched to your breaking point, but God knows your limits better than you do. He wouldn't stretch you this far if He didn't plan to take you further. The stretch proves that there's more in you than you think. You thought you'd collapse under the weight, but you're still standing. You thought the pressure would crush you, but it's pushing something powerful out of you. There's a blessing on the other side of every stretch. When the process is over, you'll realize that the pressure prepared you for promotion. You'll carry peace in places that used to bring panic. You'll have wisdom where you once had worry. The version of you that emerges from this stretch won't fit back into the spaces you left behind. That's how you know you've grown. When God elevates you, He makes sure you can't return to the old you. The stretch seals your transformation. Sometimes you'll feel like the stretch is too much. You'll cry out for relief. You'll ask God why it has to hurt this bad. But remember, He's not stretching you to destroy you. He's stretching you to strengthen your faith. The pain has a purpose. The pressure has meaning. The very thing that's making you uncomfortable is the same thing that's making you unstoppable. What you call stretching, heaven calls shaping. When you finally come out of this season, you'll realize that every tug, every tear, every test was building the capacity for what's coming. You'll see that the stretch didn't break you. It prepared you. God was enlarging your vision, expanding your endurance, increasing your faith, and refining your focus. You had to stretch to make space for the supernatural. So don't resist it. Don't rush it. Don't resent it. Embrace the stretch. Because the tension you feel right now is not the sign of failure, it's the sound of growth. You're being expanded for something extraordinary. The more it pulls, the more you're being prepared. The greater the stretch, the greater the strength. The greater the strength, the greater the story. You asked God for more. He's answering by stretching you. The pain is proof that purpose is near. The tension is confirmation that transformation is happening. You may not understand it now, but one day you'll thank God for every stretch, because it was the sign that something greater was coming, and it did. Faith doesn't flourish in familiar places. Faith was never designed to grow in comfort. It was designed to grow in challenge. When everything is predictable, you don't need faith. You just need routine. When everything makes sense, you don't need trust. You just need logic. But when the lights go out, when the plan falls apart, when what used to work stops working, that's when faith begins to breathe. Faith is the language of the unfamiliar, the strength of the unseen, the courage to walk when you don't know where the path leads. If you only stay in familiar places, your faith will never mature, because comfort feeds your control, but faith feeds your dependence on God. God will often pull you out of what's known so He can teach you what's next. He will let the brook dry up, the job shift, the plan change, not to harm you, but to help your faith stretch beyond your surroundings. The familiar makes you feel safe, but it also keeps you small. It limits your vision, your capacity, your confidence in God. You begin to trust your system more than your Savior. So in His wisdom, God shakes the foundation of the familiar to bring forth the foundation of faith. Abraham learned that when God told him to leave his country, his people, and his father's house and go to a land he would show him, God didn't hand him a map, he gave him a mandate. Go. That's faith. Leaving the known for the unknown, trusting a voice over visible evidence. The only guarantee Abraham had was that God was with him. That's all you really need. Faith is not believing in what you can see. It's believing in what he said. And sometimes God will strip away the familiar just to remind you that his word is still enough. Faith is fragile in familiar environments because familiarity breeds complacency. When everything around you is predictable, you stop expecting the miraculous. You stop depending on prayer because your pattern sustains you. But when God interrupts your rhythm, when he takes you out of the place where you know how to manage, he reawakens your need for him. That's where faith flourishes. In the tension between fear and trust. In the space where you can't see the next step, but you still move anyway. Peter experienced this when he saw Jesus walking on the water. The boat was the familiar place. It represented safety, structure, and stability. The waves were unpredictable, the wind was wild, the water was unstable, but that's where Jesus was. Faith will always call you out of the boat. It will call you into the place where your comfort ends and your confidence in God begins. Peter had to step onto something that shouldn't have held him just to experience what God could do through him. That's faith. Stepping out on what looks unstable, trusting that his word will hold you when logic says it shouldn't. You can't grow faith in a place where you're not challenged. You can't strengthen trust without risk. Every time you obey God in uncertainty, your faith takes root. Every time you walk through a valley and still declare his goodness, your faith deepens. Every time you lose something and still lift your hands in worship, your faith blossoms. Faith is not proven on mountaintops. It's perfected in valleys. The familiar can't give you that. It can make you comfortable, but it can't make you courageous. The danger of familiarity is that it teaches you to depend on the known rather than the knower. You begin to rely on your habits, your systems, your own wisdom. You stop listening for God because you already know what to do. But faith thrives when you no longer know what to do. When you've run out of strategies and the only thing left is trust, that's when faith becomes alive. The unfamiliar drives you to your knees, and that's where miracles begin. Israel struggled with this again and again. They wanted to return to Egypt because it was familiar, even though it was bondage. They couldn't see the beauty of the promised land because the wilderness required faith. The wilderness was not a punishment. It was a classroom. It was where God taught them dependence, obedience, and trust. He fed them manna daily to show them that provision flows from presence, not place. If he had let them stay in the familiar, they would have missed the miracle. When God takes you out of what's familiar, it will always feel like loss at first. You'll grieve the stability of what you understood. You'll question why he's moving you. But faith begins where familiarity ends. He takes you into uncertainty so he can introduce you to himself in new dimensions. You'll never know him as a healer until you've been sick. You'll never know him as a provider until you've been in need. You'll never know him as a deliverer until you've been trapped. The unfamiliar reveals what the familiar conceals. Faith flourishes when your senses fail you. When you can't see it, touch it, or control it, you're forced to believe it. That's why the unfamiliar is sacred ground. It's where God shows up. It's where testimonies are born, where power is revealed, where purpose is refined. If familiar is safe, but it's sterile, it can't produce growth. The unfamiliar is risky, but it's rich with revelation. Every time God moves you from what's known, He's moving you toward what's next. You may not like the way it feels, but faith doesn't need feelings to function. It thrives on trust. It feeds on surrender. It flourishes when you walk with trembling steps and still say, God, I believe you. The discomfort of the unfamiliar is not meant to destroy you. It's meant to develop you. You're being stretched, not because you're weak, but because you're being prepared to handle greater responsibility. The moment you say yes to God's call, He will begin to challenge your comfort. He'll place you in situations that make you depend on Him daily. He'll ask you to sow where you can't see harvest yet. He'll ask you to forgive when you don't feel like it. He'll ask you to step when you don't know the outcome. That's faith in action, obedience without evidence. Faith doesn't grow in the predictable, it grows in the pressure. It's the moments you don't understand that build the muscles you'll need for the future. If your environment never challenges you, your faith will stay shallow. But when storms come, when doors close, when the path gets dark, that's when your roots go deeper. That's when faith becomes real. So don't despise the unfamiliar. Don't resist it. Don't wish yourself back into comfort. God's trying to grow your faith, not your familiarity. You've already mastered this level. Now He's calling you higher. The winds you're facing aren't meant to blow you away. They're meant to build your wings. You can't fly in familiar air. You were made for more. Every step you take into the unknown is a seed of faith planted for your future. You won't always see the harvest right away, but it's growing underground. Trust the process. Keep walking. Keep believing. Because one day, you'll look back at this season and realize your faith didn't just survive, it flourished. And it flourished because you were willing to leave the familiar. God's push is the prelude to your promotion. Before every elevation, there is always agitation. Before every blessing, there's always a breaking. Before God lifts you, He pushes you. The push doesn't feel holy, it feels heavy. It doesn't feel divine, it feels disruptive. But make no mistake, behind that pressure is purpose. God will never push you unless there's something greater He's pulling you toward. That frustration you feel, that discomfort that keeps you awake at night, that closed door you can't seem to reopen. It's not the enemy working against you. It's God working for you. When God is preparing to promote you, He begins to unsettle the ground around you. The things that once satisfied you stop satisfying. The people who once surrounded you begin to distance themselves. The doors that once opened easily now resist you. It's not rejection. It's redirection. It's the divine nudge that says, you've outgrown this level. God's push is never random, it's strategic. He knows that if He doesn't push you, you'll stay stuck where it's safe. But He loves you too much to let you live beneath your potential. Every promotion comes with a push. Think about a mother in the delivery room. Before she holds her promise, she has to push through pain. She has to breathe through the contractions that signal transition. The pain doesn't mean something's wrong. It means something's ready. In the same way, when your life starts contracting, when everything tightens and the pressure mounts, that's not the time to quit, that's the time to push. The pain you feel is the proof that something inside you is about to be birthed. Joseph felt that push when his brothers betrayed him and threw him into a pit. It looked like rejection, but it was divine propulsion. The pit was the push that set him on the path to the palace. If his brothers had never pushed him out, he would have never stepped into purpose. Sometimes, the push comes from people who don't even realize they're being used by God. What they meant for evil, God will use for good. That's why you can't despise the push. Because what feels like betrayal might be the very thing that blesses you. David felt the push when Saul tried to kill him. It wasn't fair, but it was necessary. The cave became his classroom. The wilderness became his workshop. Every push pressed him closer to kingship. God used pressure to shape his heart, to teach him humility, to prepare him for the crown. You can't lead at the next level with the mindset of the last one. So God pushes you not because he's angry, but because he's upgrading you. Sometimes the push comes through disappointment. The job that ended, the relationship that collapsed, the opportunity that vanished. You prayed for it to stay, but God allowed it to end because he saw what you couldn't see. You thought you were losing something valuable, but you were actually being launched into something vital. The ending you cried over was the beginning of your elevation. God will close a door you're not strong enough to close yourself because he knows your destiny can't fit through it anymore. The push is uncomfortable, but it's essential. It builds the strength you'll need for the next season. Promotion without preparation is dangerous. God uses pressure to refine your faith, to purify your motives, to deepen your trust. You may be asking, Lord, why is this happening to me? But if you could see the view from heaven, you'd realize he's not pushing you away. He's pushing you higher. The mountain doesn't move for you, you climb it. The wind doesn't stop for you, it carries you. The push that feels like pain is actually propulsion. Elijah experienced it too. When the brook dried up, God told him to move to Zarephath. The place that once provided now offered nothing. But the drying brook wasn't a curse. It was a cue. God was saying, I'm done feeding you here. I'm ready to feed you there. The push came through the drying of provision, forcing Elijah to step into a new level of faith and obedience. Some of us are praying for God to refill what he's trying to replace. You're asking him to bless what he's finished using. But when he pushes you, it means there's fresh oil waiting on the other side of obedience. The push comes to separate you from what's safe, so you can step into what's sacred. It exposes your dependence on comfort. It teaches you to trust when you can't trace. It develops a strength that only struggle can produce. You'll never know how much faith you have until God removes your footing. You'll never know how strong your wings are until he pushes you out of the nest. The push reveals what's been hidden inside you all along. God doesn't push to destroy, he pushes to develop. He doesn't push to punish, he pushes to prepare. The delay, the detour, the disappointment, it's all part of the divine process. You are being positioned for something greater. You're not being buried, you're being planted. Seeds don't grow in comfort, they grow in darkness, under pressure, beneath the soil. But once the time is right, they break through. That's what's happening in your life right now. The push you feel is your breakthrough in disguise. Don't fight the push. Flow with it. Stop trying to rebuild what God's trying to release you from. Stop crying over the closed door and start preparing for the open one. You don't need to understand it. You just need to trust it. God never wastes a push. He knows exactly how much pressure to apply and when to release it. Every trial, every test, every tear, it's working together to lift you to a place you couldn't reach on your own. You may feel like you're being forced out of everything familiar, but that's how promotion feels. God's about to give you new territory, new influence, new authority. But He has to push you out of old thinking first. The push strips away pride, fear, and doubt so that when you arrive at the next level, you arrive with faith. What you see as loss, heaven sees as launch. You're being launched into purpose. The push always comes before the promise. It's the divine signal that change is in motion. Just like an arrow has to be pulled back before it's released forward, God will sometimes pull you through pressure before He releases you into promotion. The setback is the setup. The frustration is formation. The resistance is refinement. You're not going backward. You're being positioned for a greater release. So the next time life pushes you, don't panic. Don't complain. Say, Lord, thank you for trusting me with the push. Because if He's pushing you, He's about to promote you. The weight you feel is not to crush you. It's to condition you. The pressure you're under is producing the strength you'll need to carry the blessing that's coming. You're standing on the edge of elevation, and heaven has its hands on your back. The push is not punishment, it's prophecy. It's the whisper from God that says, you've stayed here long enough. It's time to rise. So lift your head, square your shoulders, and take the step. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just move. Because when God pushes you, He's already prepared the place you're being pushed to. What feels like chaos is actually choreography. What feels like loss is leading to legacy. What feels like the end is the prelude to your promotion. God's push is the sign that greater is on the way. And this time you're not falling, you're flying. There comes a time in every believer's journey when God says, you can't stay here any longer. That's the heartbeat of this entire message. The understanding that God loves you too much to let you live beneath your potential. From comfort to calling, from fear to faith, from survival to significance. He's been pushing, stretching, shaking, and molding you for a divine reason. The pain had purpose. The pressure had meaning. The discomfort was never designed to destroy you. It was designed to deliver you. You've walked through the breaking, but the breaking was birthing something. You've endured the stretching, but the stretch was strengthening something. Every closed door, every tear, every disappointment was not the end of your story. It was the setup for your next chapter. God has been quietly positioning you in places that looked like isolation, but were actually incubation. You've been hidden for a reason, because heaven was preparing your unveiling.